Hello, everyone. Welcome to the October Facilities Committee meeting. It looks like we have one agenda item so far on this, the capital project update. And Ms. Roing or Mr. Ramjug, do you want to let us know what's going on?
Thank you, Mr. Levenstein. This evening, we do have with us a representative from CPL and one from TPG who are going to provide a brief update on the capital project work. As the committee may recall, New Windsor, we are still waiting on word for next steps, but we do have active construction at both Vales Gate and Heritage.
Thank you. Thank you. Go ahead, please.
Good evening, everyone. Turn that on. Okay, so we're here to just provide a quick update on where we are with the capital project as a whole. Just in terms of agenda, we're talking to design first. So we have CTE building and the New Windsor project under design. And then in construction, we have Heritage and Vales Gate currently. Might as well skip that. Okay, so New Windsor, as Ms. Roaring noted, we're still at SED. There is a holdup with the project management approval. They're very understaffed. So we have been, emailing, making some phone calls, but we're not really getting very far. There is a process with SED where they just have to go through the motions, and we're sort of a sitting duck until then. In the meantime, though, we are having meetings. Just yesterday, actually, it was Tuesday, we had a meeting with the principal at New Windsor, going through the plans, making sure that they understand everything that is coming as far as the construction project, the addition, any of the renovations inside the building. We do have a few changes from that meeting, nothing major, things in terms of finishes, colors, a little bit of casework, renovation work. We still do need to go through a more extensive review as it relates to HVAC, civil work, just doing a more technical page turn with Mr. Velez.
Okay, before we go to CTE, does anybody have any questions on the New Windsor project? Mr. Studo?
As far as the delay at the state ed, how does that affect the scheduling for the work that's going to be needed? What's the schedule look like?
So we were anticipating a bid in the winter of this year, so sometime December, maybe pushing into January. As of right now, that's still a possibility. Like I said, none of the changes that were requested are going to require any kind of redesign, so to speak. So we still have a possibility to meet that. And that's actually not a bad time to bid. We want to bid in the fall, winter time frame, typically speaking, so that we gear up for a summer construction period.
Any other questions at all? Okay, so let's go on to CTE, please.
Okay, so CTE... I feel like this presentation is a little wonky. So for CTE, we have gone through a page turn process, very high level with Mr. Eitri. We want to make sure, again, doing that same process, that everybody understands what is planned for the building. We have made or have been requested to make a few changes. We have talked about this before, but just sort of to itemize some of the changes. We do have the facade, of course, we want to bring back to more in line with the community and the surrounding buildings, making it a brick facade. We are looking right now at the natural light that goes into the spaces and providing more equity amongst the program, so everybody really gets equal amounts of natural light. We also have the elimination of the main stair. I think we talked about that last time. We're now going to infill that floor opening and create more program space, so that's really a benefit to the program. There are a couple of other programmatic changes that have developed over time. So if you think about when we developed this project initially, I mean, this was 2017, 2018 timeframe. We had an idea of what the programs would be in the building, but as time moves on and things evolve, there have been some new programs that have been introduced and some have phased out. So we're making some changes in those respects. And then some other just general program changes, reshuffling maybe where a space is located in the building. For instance, we've been talking about the cafe space and where that would be located. We're moving that to the first floor. So there's just a number of changes that we're working through in those terms. Once we get a handle on what that looks like, I think on Monday we'll be discussing that more in depth with the team. Once we get that under control and we understand the breadth of those changes, we'll be revisiting the schedule on that one. We still do have to go to SED, so it's actually a good thing we're making these changes now before we're going to SED. Just kind of saves some work for everybody. And it's not uncommon to make changes like this, as we've seen this before where programs change over time. I mean, a project of this magnitude takes a number of years to build. And of course, programs change over that period of time. So it's better to make those changes now than if we were in construction. So it's not a bad thing that we are doing that. So our next steps, like I said, would be get those changes accounted for on the plans. We'll have a final page turn with the team, and then submit to SED for approval.
Anybody have questions on the CT? Mr. Studine?
So as far as the facade is concerned, what was the original design for facade? Like, what did it look like, and how much of a cost savings is it to go to a more traditional?
So we had originally, the majority of the building was a translucent panel design. So it was supposed to allow in natural light, but have just a connection to the exterior. And we are now changing that to a more traditional brick with a punched opening, clear glazing, just more in line with what the original, or not original, but what the rest of the district sort of looks like. So that was a substantial change with a substantial savings. So that was actually a good thing. I think we saved several $1 million, like 1.8, just changing the facade that way.
And as far as the reducing of the parking lot, how many square feet or how many parking spaces less do you need now? And is there any thought to using that space, because it's already been cleared, so the trees are now no longer there.
Right.
Is it any thought of using that other space for other activities? Is it going to be relatively flat area? Is it's going to be left at a more steep grade? What's the plan?
So far, we've just reduced it, the 21 spaces that we talked about the last time. I think we're still evaluating with the district how many spaces and realistically what is needed, but there's absolutely always opportunity to use that space. We're looking more at green space, depending on how many spaces that we can reduce in that particular parking lot. We may be able to get a field in, but I can't. There may be room for that, but.
And what about the budget now? I know last time we were a few $100,000 over budget. So now with the savings of the facade, are we under budget?
So we are going to have to do that redesign, I think, before we can get those documents to the Palumbo group. If you're going to ask my gut, I feel like we're where we need to be now. But of course, there's been a number of changes requested that it's almost a full redesign for us to go back to the Palumbo group to be able to re-budget or re-estimate that. So I don't have hard numbers for you because that hasn't been done yet. We need to talk Monday, get an approval on what those changes really are, and then move forward from there. But until we do that, we're not going to be able to have that set estimated until that's completed.
Final question. What is the approximate date that would actually have a building that we can use?
I would venture to guess, and Bill, do you remember off the top of your head what was the original date? It was like 2024. So I would say sometime in 2026. I think we would like to have the building open for September of 26 at this point. Welcome.
So, related to that question, but earlier, when do you think that you'd be able to submit the plans to this education department for approval? And what kind of time frame are they dealing with? A building of this size, what kind of time frame would they need to approve it?
So again, we're going to talk on Monday and just iron out exactly what changes we'll be making. Then we'll take a look at the schedule in terms of how much time it's going to take us to just wrap up those changes. It'll be a number of months based on the changes that have been requested. Once we can do that, we're going to go to SED, but then request a face-to-face review. We still have to wait in line, just like everybody else. Everyone is about, right now, I think they're 12 weeks. I don't know what it will be when we submit, but if we use 12 weeks as that gauge, it'll come up for review at that point. So after that, we should be able to sit down and do the face-to-face. It may be several meetings with them. It is a very large project. Mm-hmm. And I will say the face-to-face review expedites the review in a sense, because we can have that one-on-one conversation with them about what the design intent is, and we don't have to rely on the back and forth of here's the comments, here's an addenda. We can just have that conversation over the table. So,
all right, thank you. Any other questions on the CT?
It's not really the CT, but the overall project itself. How does the financial outlook, as far as interest rates, affect the project itself, as far as the bond? That's more of a financial question. Like, are our rates locked in for the bond, or is it adjustable?
The district borrows as we go. We have not taken out a bond for over $200 million. That would not be fiscally prudent. So as we move through the project and we look at our cash flow needs, that's when we issue short-term borrowing. That is the most cost-effective way of proceeding. But yes, rates have been impacted by the Fed's actions.
So back in 2017, 2018, when we looked at the project, the interest rates were really low. Now the interest rates are much higher. So why should we submit all this information to SED and then come back and find out that it's going to cost millions more to borrow the money for the same project? Why do we still go through this process if we don't know what the cost is going to be?
I'm sorry?
The district would basically then be making a decision not to proceed with any capital project work, and we did go out to the voters and ask them to authorize us to proceed with this project work. They agreed to do that. We've already talked about the impact of inflation and delivery of materials and goods as having a cost impact, because there's a lot of inflation involved as well. So I do recall very clearly a conversation being had about that does impact the district's dollar, and it's not going to go as far, so we may have to make some decisions about what we prioritize as we get there. But to walk away from it.
So the borrowing limit is still the $250 million with interest. Is that the case? That's with interest over the period of time?
The district is authorized to borrow what the voters authorized us to borrow. We cannot exceed that.
But that's with interest, is that correct? So say we start borrowing the money tomorrow. They factor in the $250 million net after all the interest over the period of, what is it, 30 years? Or 20 years?
So generally, you do determine that you want to align your borrowing with your debt service. If the committee is interested in a detailed conversation around the debt service schedule and things like that, we can certainly bring in our fiscal advisor to have that conversation. We're not prepared to go into depth on that this evening, but I'm happy to make that arrangement if you'd like to have some detailed conversations about borrowing in our debt service schedule.
Well, that's something we could ask the firm that is involved with the bond borrowing, we can ask them to come to a meeting and have questions for them and let them make a presentation one time in the near future. We could do that.
I think it would be helpful because if it's going to affect all the other projects moving forward, we need to know now rather than 3 years from now when we start building and we can't pay the contractors.
Okay, I don't believe we'd ever get to that point. But yes, we can certainly have that conversation to see what direction everything is heading. But that's important. Thank you.
If I could add to that conversation, just in very basic terms, the community approved 250 some odd that $1 million to spend on the project, and you can't spend a penny more. So if you're speaking to whether there's interest or not, that would be included in that $250 million project. We always knew that this project was a 7 to 10 year endeavor. A lot can happen in 7 to 10 years. I think I don't think any of us saw what did happen coming, but we do know there are, peaks and valleys in our economy that happen. So we're always bobbing and weaving with that process, and that's why we build in the flexibility of things like alternates. That's why we go through a value engineering process on projects, but we always want to be key on keeping to the referendum language, making sure that what we promise to the voters is actually going to happen in some shape or form. You're welcome.
Thank you. All right. Ms. Roy?
The other thing that we have talked about extensively over the last 5 months is making sure that we're keeping in alignment with the scope that was approved. So a lot of times as you're doing a capital project, you have scope creep, and things are asked for that were outside of the original plan. So we're being very judicious to stick to that original referendum and what we went out and asked for authorization to do and what we're going to try and deliver given all the other variables we cannot control.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay. So let's move on to Heritage, please.
Okay.
Good evening, members of the board.
Hello.
So starting with Heritage, good news is we are on time, on schedule. This building is actually right on schedule by the day. Electrical contractors have been currently working for the past month, plus or minus, inside the building, installing conduit and wiring, all new power panels, getting ready for all the new equipment coming in the summertime of 2023. The new additions moving along pretty well. The footings and foundation walls are complete. Backfill and preparations for the new slab are in progress. We'll be starting to backfill tomorrow. Structural steel is being fabricated. We have 2 more piers to dig close to the building. Those piers should be poured and finished by the middle of next week. Once they're done, then we can finalize all the precise steel measurements that we need, and then finalize the steel in production. Here's a view looking north of the new foundation walls that were poured. That's the cafeteria, the 2 glass walls there, and the existing building in the background. Picture of the walls being poured, so you have an idea. They used a pump truck with a long boom, so it's very accurate, very safe. This is a picture of interior work that's happening. This was the first night that we started pulling the wire. To give you an idea how much wire we pulled, there's about 15 of those reels that are now empty inside the job site waiting to be picked up. Here are some of the new power panels, just like the ones we have in our homes, just a little larger, that will hold all the circuit breakers for a particular area inside the building. Most of these are all in service areas, closets, things like that. The current budget status, not much has changed since the last time that we spoke. Currently, right now, total approved allowances to date are $6,097. Remaining allowance for the Heritage project itself is $133,903. Total proposals submitted to date have been around $21,182, and we've rejected 2,005, and total pending approval right now, $13,080. Any questions on Heritage?
Any questions, anyone? No? No? We're good, Mr. Devine.
All right. Moving on to Vales Gate. This project, I'm happy to say, is I'll knock on wood when I say it, is a little ahead of schedule right now. We've had some pretty good weather, pretty good conditions out there. The upfront things that forced us to push forward, like taking down the modulars, happened a lot faster than we anticipated. We got some underground work in that was unanticipated. So we're about 3 weeks ahead of schedule on this project right now. Some of the things, both projects are very, very similar in status. We have the excavation for the footings is complete. Footings and foundation walls have been poured. Exterior drainage and backfill of the foundation walls are ongoing, slab, as well as slab preparation. Underground electric and plumbing within the new addition is happening as we speak. And I'll show you in some of the pictures. Some of the CMU block has been delivered, staged on site, anticipated to start installation this week, which we have. Here's a view of us pouring the foundation walls, very similar to what you saw at Heritage. You see the existing building in the background there. I guess that's all the pictures. Okay. The current budget status. Right now, project allowance is at $115,000. Total approved allowance is $37,488. Remaining allowance balance is $77,512. Total proposals submitted to date, $119,511. Total void and rejected proposals to date, $36,075. And total pending approval are $47,061.
Any questions on Vales Gate at all? So just one general question on the two buildings where there's construction going on. Are there any complaints or comments from either staff or neighbors or employees or students or parents with the work that's going on that maybe it's interfering with their doings?
So from my end, out in the field, we have not heard a peep. I think that both schools are very happy. We've spent a lot of time up front, pre-construction, speaking with the principals and staff to make sure that we had a very solid plan in place, logistically and what we were doing day to day. Roger and I speak on a weekly basis. I give him a plan of what we're doing inside the building, a map, show him exactly what rooms, what doors need to be open, and exactly what's happening. So the communication is very well, but we have not heard a peep from any of the neighbors or from the principals or staff.
Oh, great. Okay. And you want to quickly just reiterate the last
Sure. Yeah.
things?
So this is, we do this just to remind ourselves and everybody that we take safety pretty seriously. Every day we adjust. We talk about safety in our OACM meeting minutes. We talk about safety in our contractor meeting minutes. We make sure that the contractors do toolbox talks on a daily, if not weekly basis. So toolbox talks are basically where they get all their people together. They do a safety talk. It's kind of like an instruction kind of thing. How to be aware of danger of certain kinds, things like that. So we do something new every week just to keep that up and going. We make sure that we did have a couple incidences, to be honest, with the fence. We've had some strong winds when that storm came through. The contractor was very responsive, came there within an hour, fixed the fence, and we moved on. So thank you to the contractors for being very responsive on that. Everybody wears their PPE, everybody's wearing hard hats, everybody's wearing proper boots and attire. And like I said, we take it very we take it very serious. The Raptor system is still our #1 goal. Everybody that steps through the gate goes through that Raptor system. We put one of the visitor stickers on their hard hat so we can identify personnel out in the field, and then we see that hard hat, we know that they've been in. On top of that, we make sure that they check in every day. We check their OSHA cards, and we check their ID to make sure that their face matches who they say on their cards. So just want to reiterate that safety is our biggest concern. We also talk about communications. We don't allow the contractors to talk to students, staff, and this is one of the reasons why we kind of stay, keep all the contractors in their own little behind the fence. Roger and I, or the other super, do a lot of the communication, and that's how we get through the system. That's pretty much it.
All right. Does anybody have any questions? Yes, Mr. Skudai.
So regarding these meetings that you talked about, is that meetings with just Clark Patterson? Is it the team that meets, and how often do you meet?
So our OACM meeting minutes are weekly. Every Monday, unless we have a Monday off, then it gets shifted to another date. The OACM is owner, contractor. It's CPL, TPG, and owner meetings where we discuss issues, problems, as well as things moving forward in the future, like CTE and New Windsor building, kind of to bring the district up to date where we stand on a weekly basis. And then we have a contractor meeting once a week where we meet the contractors, both separate projects, one of each project, and we sit down as well with the owner, ourselves, and the contractors, and we do exactly the same thing. We talk about issues, how do we resolve them, and then schedule moving forward. Safety items is also a big talk in those meetings as well.
So as far as these meetings with our board representatives, we feel as if that everything is on track, everything is moving forward. Are there any, I wouldn't say issues, but are there any concerns that you have is there like a report to the board or to the superintendent about these meetings? Is there anything documented as far as concerns?
Yes, there is communication in the form of updates. As Mr. Devine says, we have an OACM meeting, and there are minutes that are generated from that, as well as we have the 2 project meetings, one for each school on Wednesdays. And as recently as today, I put the Palumbo group on point about furthering those communications in terms of safety. We talked at length about those things today. So an answer to your question is yes.
So would it be possible for the facilities committee to have those meeting minutes as a documentation of progress, or?
You'd have to ask Ms. Roaring about that, if they're, recorded and available in.
So that is something that is managed by our CPL and TPG. The district doesn't have any responsibility in that piece of it. This is the purpose of our facilities committee updates, is to provide updates in terms of where we are. We do use written communication to make sure that there's documentation of any areas of concern, both with TPG and CPL from the district, so that is something that everybody has a paper trail of and everyone's aware of if that occurs. And as Roger said, they do have regular progress meetings to make sure that things are staying on point.
So basically, my concern is that we don't have a similar breakdown in communication that gets to a point where it's a bad situation. So as long as everything's documented and everyone's on the same page, I'm fine with that. I just want to make sure that we don't go into a bad situation.
I agree. Okay, does anybody else have any?
And I just wanted to add, so then there's also our update to the board via the BOE Weekly, giving all intricate information, up-to-date information.
All right, if there's no more questions, thank you guys, thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, everybody.
And we will see you next month.
Thank you.
And Ms. Roaring,
I have a couple of quick items to update if I can. In Mr. Velez's absence, I wanted to just provide a quick update relative to.
We're still in the meeting.
There There's just a couple quick items I want to touch on before the committee has some additional conversation. Mr. Velez is currently in the process of completing the annual fire inspections of each of our buildings, so he's doing the walkthroughs to make sure that everything is in compliance with the fire code, and will be completing those updates to SED this fall. He also wanted to provide a brief update. We came to the board last week at the Finance Committee and sought emergency authorization for a septic repair at Fostertown. That work has been completed. We did send out those pumps. They have been repaired, and everything is working as it should be working in Fostertown right now.
So septic is completed, you said, that work? Okay.
That's my understanding from Mr. Velez.
Okay.
We may be coming forward with a request for a repair of the elevator at Meadow Hill. That's the third item I had any information on to share with you this evening.
Okay. So, Ms. Roaring, is there anything else you would like to discuss further with the committee?
Not in the public session.
Okay. Not in regular session? Okay, so we will call an executive session of this committee to
Employment history of particular corporations.
employment history of particular corporation. Okay, so vote to go into executive session. Mr. Striddine? Okay, I'm sorry, still moved. I'll second. Yes. Mr. Striddine is yes, Mr. Doria is yes, I'm yes. Okay.